Most people walking around today think they need about $1 million to retire. That number gets repeated so often, it almost sounds official. The real number, the one the data actually points to in 2026, is worse than that. And almost nobody is doing the math out loud. My name is Victor, and on this channel we run the real numbers so you do not have to guess. No motivational speeches. No vague advice about cutting out your morning coffee. Just the figures, where they come from, and what they mean for you specifically. Here is the gap that started this whole video for me. When researchers asked Americans this year how much they think they need to retire comfortably, the average answer came back at $823,800. Then they looked at what the typical retiree has actually saved. The number was $288,700. Sit with that for a second. The country is short by more than $500,000 per person on average against its own definition of comfortable. That is not a rounding error. That is the entire retirement plan missing. So today we are going to find the real number, not the headline, not the comforting version, the one underneath. Let me explain why this matters to you even if retirement feels far away. That $500,000 gap is not an abstract statistic. It turns into a monthly income problem the moment you stop working. For a typical American couple retiring this year, the shortfall shows up as something very concrete. The numbers point to an income gap of somewhere between $10,000 and $17,000 every single year in retirement. That is money they expected to have and simply will not. Year after year, for 20 or 30 years. Now think about what that gap forces people to do. It means working 5 years longer than planned. It means moving in with adult children. It means choosing between the heating bill and the prescription. These are not edge cases. This is becoming the median experience, and the median is supposed to be the normal one. There is a second layer to this that seldom makes it into the cheerful retirement ads. Social Security, the thing most people quietly assume will catch them, is on a clock. Under current law, if Congress does nothing, the projections show an across-the-board benefit cut of about 22% landing in the next decade. For a future retiree, that single change works out to roughly $137,280 in lost guaranteed lifetime income. Guaranteed income gone because of a math problem lawmakers keep postponing. So the stakes are simple. If you accept the friendly version of this story, you plan for a shortfall you do not see coming. And the people who plan around the real number are the ones who actually get to choose when they stop working. Everyone else has the choice made for them. Before we get into what the data actually shows, I want to be fair to the conventional wisdom because there is a reason people believe it. For about 30 years, the standard advice has been some version of this. Save 15% of your income. Get the employer match. Put it in an index fund. Wait. And honestly, for a certain kind of worker in a certain era, that worked. It assumed 3 things were true. It assumed you had a stable job with a 401k for most of your career. It assumed Social Security would replace around 40% of your income on top of your savings. And it assumed the cost of the things retirees actually buy, mostly healthcare and housing, would rise at roughly the same speed as everything else. All 3 of those assumptions are cracking at the same time. Start with the savings vehicle. The 401k was never designed to be the main pillar of retirement. It was built in 1978 as a supplement, a little tax-advantaged bonus on top of a pension. Then companies quietly killed the pension and handed workers the 401k as the whole plan. The problem is that a voluntary system only works if people can afford to volunteer money into it. Many cannot. You can see it in the balances. The median retirement savings across American households sits around $87,000. For people right on the doorstep of retirement, ages 55 to 64, the median retirement account balance is roughly $185,000. That sounds like a lot until you divide it by a 30-year retirement. And here is the figure that really stops me. When you look at the typical 401k participant in Vanguard's data, the median balance is just $35,286. Median, not average. Half of those savers have less than that. So the hypothesis going into this video was straightforward. Maybe the crisis is overstated. Maybe averages are getting dragged down by people who simply chose not to save. That is the story we tell ourselves because it is comforting. It means the problem belongs to other people who made bad choices. The data did not cooperate with that story. Let me show you what happened when I actually walked through the math. I want to do this the way I would do it at my own kitchen table, with the real figures so you can follow every step. Start with the target. The most common rule of thumb says you need about 80% of your pre-retirement income each year to maintain your lifestyle. Take a household earning around $75,000, which is close to the national median. 80% of that is $60,000 a year in retirement income. Now, where does that $60,000 come from? Two sources for most people: Social Security and personal savings. Social Security first. The average retired worker benefit in 2026 lands somewhere around $24,000 a year. For a couple where both worked, call it roughly $40,000 combined, though many households come in well under that. Let us be generous and say Social Security covers $40,000 of the $60,000 target. That leaves a gap of $20,000 a year that your own savings have to produce. Here is where the famous 4% rule comes in. The idea is that you can safely withdraw about 4% of your nest egg in the first year of retirement and adjust for inflation after that without running out of money over 30 years. So if you need your savings to throw off $20,000 a year, you work backwards. 20,000 divided by 4%. That tells you the nest egg you need is $500,000. 500,000. Just to cover the gap between Social Security and a median lifestyle. Not a luxury retirement. Not travel and a boat. Just keeping the lights on at the level you are used to. Now go back to the balances we just looked at. The median household near retirement has about $185,000. The target was $500,000. They are short by $315,000, and they are already standing at the doorway. There is no time left to compound their way out. But it gets worse, and this is the part the friendly version skips. Every number I just used assume today's conditions hold. They will not. Take that Social Security piece, the $40,000 we leaned on so heavily. Apply the 22% cut that current law schedules if nothing changes. $40,000 becomes about $31,000. That missing $9,000 a year does not disappear. It moves onto the savings pile. Now your nest egg has to cover $29,000 a year instead of $20,000. Run it through the 4% rule again. 29,000 divided by 4%. The target jumps from $500,000 to $725,000. So in one move, just by being honest about Social Security, the real number for a median household climbs by $225,000. Then add the cost problem. Retirees do not buy the average basket of goods. They buy a basket that is heavy on healthcare, and healthcare costs have been climbing faster than general inflation for years. A 65-year-old couple retiring now is looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars in out-of-pocket medical costs across retirement before a single vacation. The researchers put a sharp point on this. They calculated that Americans retiring in 2032 will need to save an additional $127,600 out of their own pockets compared to today just to absorb these shifting costs. And to put that in perspective, that extra $127,600 is roughly 70% of the entire median retirement balance for people aged 55 to 64. The cost increase alone almost equals everything they have managed to save. Stack it all up. The comfortable number people quote is $823,800. The honest, adjusted number for a median household, once you account for the Social Security cut and the rising cost of being old, pushes well past that for anyone retiring in the next decade. And the median saver is sitting at a fraction of it. That is the real number. The gap is not 500,000 by accident. It is 500,000 because every assumption in the friendly plan was a little too optimistic and the errors all point the same direction. So why is the gap this wide? If the math is this clear, why are tens of millions of people walking straight into it? This is where behavioral finance explains more than the spreadsheets do. The shortfall is not mainly a knowledge problem. It is a psychology problem, and three forces are doing most of the damage. The first is present bias. Our brains are wired to weigh a reward today far more heavily than a reward in 30 years. Researchers who study this describe the future self almost like a stranger. Saving for retirement feels, to the brain, like giving money to someone you have never met. So we discount it. Every behavioral study on this points the same way. When the cost is now and the benefit is distant, people consistently choose now, even when they know better. The second force is optimism bias. Survey after survey finds that people expect to retire earlier than they actually do and with more money than they actually have. We assume a raise is coming. We assume we will catch up later. We assume the market will bail us out. 2/3 of retirees, 64%, now say out loud that the country is in a retirement crisis. But ask working people if it will happen to them personally, and most still say no. The crisis is always someone else's. The third force is the one I find most unfair, and it is plain inertia plus design. The system asks people to opt in, to choose a contribution rate, to pick investments, to resist cashing out when they change jobs. Every one of those steps is a place where a busy, stressed person does nothing. And doing nothing, in a voluntary system, means saving nothing. Here is the finding that ties it together. The retirement crisis is not really a story about lazy people who refuse to save. It is a story about an honest math problem colliding with a brain that was never built to plan 3 decades inside a system that made the easy choice the wrong one. When you see it that way, the $500,000 gap stops being mysterious. It is exactly what you would predict. And that reframing matters because if the problem were just laziness, the solution would be a lecture. It is not laziness, so the solution is not a lecture. It is design. So what do you actually do with this? Not someday, this month. First, find your own real number instead of borrowing a headline. Take your current annual income, multiply by 0.8, and subtract a deliberately conservative Social Security estimate. I would tell you to plan as if your benefit is cut, not full, because that is the direction the law currently points. Whatever gap is left, divide it by 4%. That is your personal target. It will probably scare you. Good. A number that scares you is a number you can plan around. A vague feeling is not. Second, fix the design, not your willpower. Do not rely on remembering to save. Automate it so the money leaves before you ever see it. Then turn on the one feature almost nobody uses, the automatic annual increase. Set your contribution to climb by 1% every year on its own. You will not feel a 1% bump, but it quietly drags your savings rate from 5% up toward 15% over a decade without a single act of discipline. You are using inertia for you instead of against you. Third, capture the free money first. If your employer matches contributions and you are not getting the full match, you are turning down a guaranteed return that no investment can beat. That is the first dollar to fix today before any fancy strategy. Fourth, if you are over 50 and behind, the tax code actually hands you a tool. Catch-up contributions let you put thousands more into tax-advantaged accounts every year specifically to close this gap. Most people who qualify never use them. None of this requires you to predict the market or pick a hot stock. It requires you to know your real number and then remove yourself from the decision so a busy month never costs you a year of retirement. Quick question for the comments because I read them. What number did you get when you did the 80% math on yourself? I am genuinely curious how far off the million-dollar myth turned out to be for you. If this changed the number in your head, the next one will too. Next week, I am breaking down the credit score and specifically how a number you barely think about is quietly costing the average person thousands of dollars every single year without them ever seeing the bill. Subscribe so you do not miss it. I will see you in the next one.